Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in. And I think good time to start now. We'll let other people to keep joining in as we continue forward. But once again, good morning to each one of you. So I'll be your host for today. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ReWiser, Rashdeep this side. And as you all know, today's webinar is all about SATs, ACTs, and AP exams. So what we are going to look at is holistically a child journey from grade 9 to grade 12. And this particular webinar is critical for the parents, for the students who are planning to go abroad for their undergrad study, right? And we will be talking about the standardized tests. We'll be talking about the academics. We'll try and cover the different gamuts here. And in today's, the major focus is going to be on the standardized test prep, and we will try and cover each one of them individually as well. With that, let me quickly give a brief, as I said, what we are going to talk about today. So we'll try and understand these tests. What are these tests? Who should write it? When should they write it? What's the importance of writing these tests? What are the timelines? When should you be writing it with regards to your application planning? So we will be showing you a particular timeline starting from grade 9 to grade 12. What are the activities that you should be doing? Then the countries which accept SAT, ACT, and AP. We'll also be talking about in India. Let's say if in case you want to keep India as a plan B option, then what are the countries which accept SAT scores? And towards the end, we'll talk about ReWiser pedagogy and the timeline, the way we kind of help students and the families to plan their studies for the grade 9 to 12 for these particular exams, right? So that is going to be today's agenda for the entire webinar. With regards to the format of the webinar today, I think we'll have the presentation for first about 35 to 40 minutes. And post that, we will open the session for the Q&As. If in case you guys have any questions while we are presenting any slide, please feel free to put it up onto the chat section. And we'll try and take up all these questions towards the end, right? So that is how the format is going to be. With that, I think, let me start with the presentation. And let me quickly introduce you to the company first. So at ReWiser, we are a high school support company which assists students worldwide to achieve their high school academic goals. Our grade of focus is from grade 9 to grade 12. And we largely cater to two main verticals. The first one is test prep, where we do SATs, ACTs, PSAT, and AP exam prep. And then the other vertical that we also have is in the academic tutoring space, where we do IGCSE, IB, and A-level subject tutoring, right? So these are the two verticals that we cater to. We've been in the market for about 6 years now. We've catered to about 3,500, 4,000 odd students in the last 6 years. We have students from almost about 8+ countries as of today, which includes US, Canada, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. Now, with that, let me quickly deep dive into the first part, which is the SAT, ACT, right? So what are these exams? They're predominantly the standardized tests, which are needed for most of the undergrad applicants in US. They're needed by most of the four-year colleges. They help college determine the preparedness level for the college level work. The idea of doing these tests is for the college to figure out how ready the child is to basically cope up with the college level exams, right? That's the whole idea of giving the SATs and ACTs, because please note, irrespective of whatever college you apply to, whatever degree you apply to, unlike India, for example, in India, if you look at engineering, if you want to apply to engineering, you would be writing JEE. If you want to apply to medical, then you might be writing NEET, and so on and so forth. However, in US, this is very different. Irrespective of whether you want to apply to engineering, medicine, economics, business, finance, anything, you have to still write the same exam, which is SAT or ACT, and they test you on basic English and maths, right? So these are the two major components that you will encounter in these exams. They're mandatory by most of the US colleges. In addition to the US colleges, they also helps in many other geographies. And to name few, some of the geographies that you can also use the SAT scores, you can use it in Canada, you can use it in Australia. UK, you don't need SAT or the ACT scores. Singapore also, you can submit the SAT ACT score. Similarly, in Australia as well, you can submit your SAT scores. Though apart from US, there is no country which mandates it, but it's good to do it. And if in case you have done it, they do provide you an option to submit your SAT scores in their college application. So it's always advisable, if in case you have done it and you've achieved a decent score, then it's always advisable for you to go ahead and submit these scores to the college, irrespective of wherever you are applying. Now, let's try and understand these two tests. So whenever I talked about SAT, ST, I always said it's SAT or ACT. So these two are two different tests, which is offered by two different organizations. So SAT is done by a company called College Board. ACT, on the other hand, is done by an organization called ACT.org. Now, you don't have to write both. You could either write SAT or you could write ACT. As an individual, what you really need to figure out which is the right test for the child, right? Or as a student, you need to figure out which is the right test for me, right? And the best way to do that is to write a diagnostic test, right? I mean, our strong recommendation has always been that you should write a diagnostic test, one for SAT, one for ACT, see what your scores are, and based on that, you should figure out which is the ideal test for you. Ultimately, the objective is to do well, whether it's an SAT or an ACT, it doesn't really matter, to be very honest, especially in US when I'm talking about, right? SAT do have certain advantage, like you can also submit it to some of the colleges in India, Singapore, Australia, Canada as well. However, ACT on the other hand, if in case you're very sure that US is the geography that you want to apply to, ACT is equally acceptable in all the colleges in US as SAT. And to be very honest, if you look at the data of number of people who write the SAT versus ACT in US, there are actually more takers for ACT in US than SAT. It's only outside of India, there's SAT, outside of US, SAT has gained a lot more popularity, and there are a lot more students who are writing the SAT exam, right? So I think one point to drive home from this is, don't pick one test just because what the peers are doing. I think try and figure out the test which is most suitable for you, and based on that, you start working, improving in that particular test, right? The next important thing, the frequency of tests. So both these tests, as of now, SAT happens 5 times a year, which is in the month of March, May, August, October, and December. ACT, on the other hand, happens 7 times a year, which is in the month of Feb, April, June, July, September, October, December. So if you really look at it, ACT is happening more often than SAT. But as we are speaking, there are changes which are happening in SAT as well. And in the next 3 months, we expect that the SAT will also be happening 7 times a year. So today's webinar, so we have done this webinar in the past as well, but today's webinar is important from the perspective that SAT, I don't know how many of you are aware, SAT is going digital. So far, ACT is an online test. It's an online test for which you still have to go to the center and do it. SAT so far has been a pen and paper test, but starting March next year, which is March 2023, SAT is also going to be a digital exam. That's the big change which is happening. So there is the last exam which is happening this December is the last SAT which will happen in pen and paper format in the old existing format. And hence, in today's presentation, we are not talking about the SAT with regards to the old format because December is the last attempt. We are going to talk about SAT only with regards to the new format, which is the digital SAT starting March 2023. One more thing to note here is this digital SAT is being introduced only for the international students right now. In US, they will continue to do the pen and paper for one more year. It's only in the month of March 2024 that they're going to introduce the digital SAT in US as well. So that's an important fact again. There are some students who are in grade 11th and they probably would have done one attempt of non-digital SAT, which is a pen and paper SAT, and they might want to write one more. So some of them are actually traveling to US, let's say during the summer break this year, to go ahead and write the next attempt. This is only for the students who are in grade 11 and who are going to get into grade 12 right now. For all the students who are in grade 9, 10th, I think the only option left now is to look at digital SAT for all of you, right? Now, the third thing, which is very important again, is the duration of the exam. So ACT at this point of time is a 3-hour, 40-minute test. Now 3-hour is mandatory and then 40-minute is from the optional component, which is an essay component. On the other hand, if you look at SAT, the new SAT format is only going to be 2 hours, 14-minute test. So that's a big change which is happening in the SAT. SAT used to be a 3-hour long test, and now it's going to be just a 2-hour, 14-minute test. So that's a big change. It's going to be a shorter test as compared to ACT. The other important difference between SAT and ACT now, which is coming up, is ACT is not an adaptive test. It's a CRT test. It's basically not an adaptive test. However, if you look at SAT, SAT is going to be a sectional adaptive test. And I'll explain it to you. What do I mean by sectional adaptive test, right? but SAT is going to be an adaptive test, and it is going to be a digital test starting March. And it's a much shorter test, which is a 2 hour, 14-minute test. Now let's look at the sections which are going to be there in SAT and which are there in ACT right now. Let's look at the ACT first. In ACT, the first section that you have is the English section, which is predominantly the grammar rules, right? So you basically will have passage, there are some errors, and you have to rectify those errors. And you have 4 options out of these 5 options actually in English, out of which 5 options, 1 is the right answer. So you have to pick the right answer. So it's a multiple choice question. And in English, you have a total of 75 questions. The next section that you have is the math section, wherein you are allowed to use the calculator all throughout the section. You have a total of 60 minutes and you have a total of 60 questions. So you have 1 minute per question to solve the math question, right? So this is in the math section of ACT. The third section that you have is a reading comprehension section, where you will be reading the passages and answering the question. There are a total of 4 passages, and every passage will have 10 questions. And based on, in totality, you have a total of 40, and you have only about 35 minutes to solve these questions, right? To answer these questions. So that's the reading comprehension section. And then the fourth section, which is the science section. And this is very important. So, a lot of parents, students do come to us and say, hey, you know what? We don't want to write ACT because my kid wants to apply only for economics major, and ACT has a science component. So let me, bust this myth that we have here. When I say there's a science section in ACT, you are not required to have any science knowledge, or you're not required to have any science subjects in school. The science section is predominantly a reading section. You are reading science-based passages and then answering the question. So it's predominantly a reading section. So it's no longer a science section. It's pretty much like a reading section. You have unseen passages. If you've done those experiments in the past, the passages that are given to you, you always have some advantage. However, even if you have not done it, it's completely fine. You could consider it like a reading comprehension section. So these are the 4 sections that you have in the ACT, which is in the 33 hours. And then you have an optional essay component, which is for about 40 minutes, where you need to write an essay. And that's an optional component. You can decide to write it, or you can skip it as well. That's on the ACT side. However, now if I look at the ACT has changed drastically here, and I think it's important to understand what it is. Now, in ACT, they're largely going to be only 2 sections. The first section is going to be reading and writing, and the second section is going to be maths. So one of the major change, if you've noticed, I'm not saying English and reading separate, I'm saying reading and writing. So English is clubbed together in one section and math is clubbed together in one section. Now, in the first section, which is the reading and writing, you will have 2 stages. Stage 1, which will have a total of 27 questions, and you will have 32 minutes to solve these 27 questions. This will be a combination of reading and writing, as I said again. And then you will have stage 2, where again, you will have total of 27 questions, and you have to do these 27 questions in 32 minutes. Now, what is the difference between stage 1 and stage 2? If you remember, I said SAT is going to be an adaptive test. So every student who will apply or write the SAT, let's say in March, will have the same stage 1 paper. But depending on their performance in stage 1, their stage 2 paper will get decided. So when you, let's say if Rajdeep logs into the system, and the moment I log into the system for writing my March exam, it will download 3 papers in totality for me for reading and writing. The first one, which is a common one, and then there are 2 other which are hidden. Based on my performance in the first one, the other 2 would be decided. One of them is obviously slightly easier and another one is slightly difficult. If I extend to do well in my stage 1, then I will be thrown with a slightly difficult set of questions. If I end up doing badly in my stage 1, then I'll be given an easier section. So that's how the 2 sections would be, that's how the 2 stages are divided. I hope that sort of makes sense. And if in case there are questions, please put it up onto the chat section, and I'll be happy to take it up at the later stage. Similarly, the next section would be the math section. And again, in the math section, you'll have 2 stages, stage 1, stage 2. Here you will have 22 questions each, and you have 35 minutes in each stage. Again, you will have stage 1, standard for all students. Depending on your performance in stage 1, the stage 2 will be decided. Would you get, let's call it stage 2A or 2B. 2A if you do well, 2B if you don't do well in stage 1. That's how the stages would be divided. Now, that basically means now it's no longer important how many number of questions you do well, right? So let's say there might be a student who would have done 40 questions right in maths, and there would be another student who might have done only 38 questions right, but their score might be similar, because the scaling is now not based on the number of questions that you've done right. It's also based on which sort of stage you have gone through, depending on your first stage performance, right? So that's how the scaling will change as well. And hence it is expected that they no longer will give you the raw scores. You would not get to know how many questions you got right. They're gonna only give you the final scores out of 800 points. So English is going to be out of 800. So reading and writing section is going to be out of 800, and maths is out of 800. In totality, it will be out of 1600. Fortunately, that has not changed. Even in the previous SAT format, SAT was out of 1600, and it continued to be out of 1600 even now. ACT, on the other hand, is on a scale of 36, where 36 is an average of individual sections. So every individual section is scaled on a scale of 1 to 36, and then the average of the 4 sections is found out. That becomes your final score, right? So the ACT is always out of 36 points. SAT, on the other hand, is out of 1600 points. Now, just to give you a sort of concordance table between the SAT and the ACT, if you look at ACT, 34 out of 36 is a 99th percentile. That means you are in the top 1 percentile bracket. However, on the other side, if you look at SAT, you need at least about 1500 plus to get into a 99 percentile bracket, right? So roughly about 1500 would be equivalent to about 34, right? So that's how the concordance table looks like between the two. And then, I think since in today's webinar, we are going to cover everything, from the top. We are not going deep inside the SATs and ACTs today. But this is just to give you a fair understanding in terms of how you should be selecting the test, when should you be selecting the test, and what are the different sections that you can see in the exam. With that, let me move on to the next thing, which is the PSAT, right? What is PSAT? PSAT is nothing but a preliminary SAT, or it's a shortened version of the SAT, right? Do any colleges ask you for a PSAT score? Honestly speaking, no. No college will ask you for a PSAT score. PSAT is, important for in some cases. So let me try and list down those cases, right? So case 1 could be if you're a US citizen, if the child is a US citizen, and if you're applying to US, and in that case, if you write PSAT in grade 11th, then it's also known as NMSQT, which is National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, right? So any student who is a US citizen, they should write the PSAT in grade 11th, because they would be eligible for a certain level of scholarship if in case they end up doing well. So that is one reason why people write PSAT. Now, the second reason why you could also write PSAT could be there are some students who apply for summer schools, right? So let's say you're in grade 10th right now and you want to apply for summer schools in your summer break. PSAT can play some role there, because there are certain summer school programs which ask you for a PSAT score, and if you've done well there might be a chance to get certain scholarships also. So that is another reason why people write PSAT. The third reason, which is common and generic reason why people write a PSAT, is also to figure out if in case where do you stand at this point of time, right? Are you at a 90th percentile? Are you at 95th percentile, 60th percentile, 95th percentile? And how much do you need to improve, and where do you need to improve to get a certain score in the SAT? So it also becomes more like a practice SAT, right? Now, how are these two tests different? And as I just mentioned, there's a complete overhaul which is happening in the SAT. In today's webinar, I have considered the PSAT, which is the existing format, and SAT of the new format, because PSAT will only change next year, which is 2023 October. So we still don't have clarity how that's going to change. So in the current table, you will see the older PSAT format, where you have a reading section, wherein you have a total of 47 questions and you have 1 hour to solve it. In the writing section, you have 44 questions and you have 35 minutes to solve it. In totality, you can score anywhere between 160 to 760, 760 being the highest and 160 being the lowest score. Then you look at maths, you have no calculator and calculator section. No calculator, you have total of 17 questions and you have 25 minutes. In the calculator section, you have a total of 31 questions and you have a total of 45 minutes. Again, 160 to 760 is the score that you can achieve. The highest that you can get in a PSAT is 1520. That's the highest score that you can achieve in the PSAT. However, on the other hand, in SAT, as I've mentioned, there are going to be only two sections. The first section is going to be reading and writing, which will have 2 stages, but in totality, you will have 54 questions. And out of 54 questions, you have 64 minutes to solve these questions. When you look at maths, you have a total of 44 questions and you have a total of 70 minutes to solve these questions. Now, let me add one more thing here, which I kind of missed out in the last slide. So out of these 54 questions, if you remember, I said in stage 1, reading and writing, you'll have a total of 27 questions and 32 minutes. Out of these 27 questions, only 25 questions will be evaluated. There would be 2 questions which will be experimental questions. And they could be anywhere between those 1 to 27. It will not be told to you which are those experimental questions. If you get those 2 questions wrong, it doesn't really matter. What they're trying to figure out is they're trying to build their database. They're trying to figure out what should be the level of these 2 questions. So these are experimental questions, right? So in every section, 2 questions are experimental questions. So stage 1, 2 questions for English, stage 2, 2 questions for English. And similarly in maths as well, out of 22, only 20 will be marked. The remaining 2 are experimental questions. But what is important to note here, the student at no point will know which is an experimental question. So for them, all 22 questions are equally important. Yeah, so I have the slide, but I think I've covered pretty much everything when I'm talking about the changes in SAT. So test time has been reduced from 3 hours to 2 hours, 14 minutes. There'll be only 2 sections instead of 4. Students will have more time per question. The test will be online and will be taken on a laptop or a tablet. You can actually carry your own device to the exam center, which is a great relief. The testing app would save student progress while they work. So let's say if in case for some reason your system shuts down, you can actually restart the exam at the same place without losing any time, which is a great progress again. Use of calculator throughout the math section, which is not the case at this point of time. The test will be adaptive in nature. The scores will be released sooner because it's going to be an online test. The final scores will be released much sooner. So currently it happens in almost about 2 weeks. It takes about 15 days. However, once the introduction of digital SAT, we're expecting just like ACT, the exam result might be out in say about 3 days time. So with that, we have covered the SAT, ACTs and PSAT, and we'll be moving on to the next exam, which is the advanced placement and AP courses, which is again very, very critical. So far, if in case you guys have any questions, feel free to put it up onto the chat section. We will be taking up the questions from the chat section, right? Sorry. So yeah. With that, let me start with the advanced placement, right? So what is advanced placement exams, right? So these are the exams that students have to write. If you remember, when I started off the presentation or talked about one thing, where I said, if you want to apply for engineering in India, you're writing JEE. If you're applying for medicine, you're writing NEET, right? However, in US, that's not the case. You're writing SAT or ACT, which is testing just English and maths, right? Now, let's say if I'm applying for economics major, right? How do colleges just look at English and maths and based on that decide whether they should give the admission to the student or not, right? Now, that becomes a bigger question mark here. The US admission process or UK or Canada or Singapore, the admission process is very, very different, unlike India. In India, everything is based on your scores. You do well in grade 12th, and then you write the entrance exam. Based on your entrance exam, your ranks get decided and you get to college. However, when you look at US, for example, right, the admission process there is very, very different. Even if you get a perfect score in SAT, that does not guarantee you admission in any college for that matter, be it Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, name any college, nobody will give you a guarantee even if you have a perfect score. But unlike in India, right, then what do you really need to do? Before I deep dive into AP, let me talk about something here, which is very, very important. If you really look at the admissions abroad, it's largely divided into 3. It's largely relying on 3 major factors. The first one is your academics. When I talk about academics, I'm talking about grade 9th, 10th, 11th actual scores, and I'm talking about grade 12 predicted score. So all the 4-year school grades are really, really important. If there are students here on the call today, please try and understand that you cannot just do well in grade 12th or grade 10th, which are your board years, but you also have to do fairly well in 9th and 11th as well, because those scores will also go to the college. You will have to submit your transcripts to the college for all the 4 years. Hence, it's very, very important that you do well in academics. That's almost about 60% of your college admission process. In the remaining 40%, the second important thing that comes here is your standardized test. When I talk about standardized test, what I basically mean SAT or ACT and other exams like AP, right? Advanced placement course, and we will go in detail into it in some time. The third component, which is also important, is your profile building. When I talk about profile building, I'm sure you must have heard about this word so many times. What do I really mean by profile building? How can you showcase your interest in particular subject? How do you showcase that I'm interested in economics, right? To do that, I need to work backwards. I have to have projects related to economics. I have to have research papers. I have to have white papers. I have to have, let's say, blogs. I have to have done internships. I have to done some project. That will showcase that I'm genuinely interested in this particular subject. And in addition to that, if you've done any extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities, leadership roles, anything that you've done apart from this in your 4 years of college journey, which is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, that plays an important role. So basically, if you really look at it, it's the three major things: academics, test prep, and profile building. And that is what you really need to do in the 4 years. Obviously, in today's webinar, our focus is only on the test prep, but just to give you a broader perspective, these are the other two parameters that you also really need to look at. Coming back to advanced placement, now what do you write advanced placement? So advanced placement actually happens for almost about 30 plus subjects, right? So they are college level exams, which basically showcase your strength in a particular subject. For example, there's an AP in AP Calculus, which showcase your strength in AP Calculus. If in case you have done AP Calculus exam and you get a 515, so AP is scaled on a scale of 1 to 5. And if you get a 515, you can actually get almost about 8 credits, because in US, you have to gain certain credits to graduate, right? So you will get 8 credits. What does that imply? That implies that you can actually skip your maths, semester 1 maths, semester 2 maths, and semester 3 maths. You don't have to do these courses when you are in college. That's just one example, right? And now how does that help? Now, one of the major reasons why people write AP, because it helps you to stand out in college admission. If you have done AP courses as opposed to someone else who have not, you are basically showcasing that you have done more than your peers. You have showcased your strength in particular subjects. So you are putting a strong foot forward with regards to your application. And hence, it's very, very important if in case you're doing an AP, it helps you to stand out in college admissions. Second, as I mentioned, it helps you to earn college credits. Now, why is that important, right? So college credit helps you twofolds. First, it helps you to save money, because in US, when you are actually paying to earn every credit, and every credit is almost about $1,000 to $1,500. So let's again going back to that calculus example. If you've done AP calculus, you get 8 credits. That's about $8,000. You are talking about 6.5 lakh cost saving just by doing one AP course, right? So that is one of the reasons why people write AP, because you get college credit. If you get college credit, you save money. In addition to that, the biggest advantage is also you don't have to do these 3 courses when you are in US. That means your workload can actually be lowered down by doing few APs while you are in India itself, right? Because now people use it in 2 different ways. One is you can lower down your let's say number of courses that you're doing there. B, you can actually take additional courses and finish your degree, let's say an year early or 6 months early. You graduate early. Third, some people actually wants to do minor in something else. So they will take certain courses from other majors and try and do the minor in a particular subject, right? So these are different reasons why people do APs. They earn credit, but the earning credit has different implications that they can use it for. As I said, skip introductory classes, yes, and to build rigor, because obviously if you're writing APs, I think it helps you to showcase that you've built additional rigor. And I think it's very, very important for the students who are, I'm sure there are parents here in the webinar who are coming from CBSE, ICSE, State Board, IB, A-levels, IGCSE background. So my appeal to all the parents who are from CBSE, ICSE, and state board, I think for them, AP is a very, very important tool for them to showcase that, the board that the child is doing is the child is still capable of taking up higher level courses as well. Even though they might not be doing IB and IGCSE, this might be a good way to showcase them their strength. Because remember, when the students are doing IB and A levels, which is IGCSE, Cambridge, they get college credits anyways, right? So it's very, very important for the students who are coming from CBSE, ICSE, ISC, or from state board to do these exams. However, having said that, that does not mean that students who are doing IB and ASA level don't do APs. They also do APs, but then the reason for doing APs could be very different, right? Just to take an example. So let's say if I want to do a computer science major, right? And in school, I have not taken computer science HL. So in that case, I could actually take an AP computer science outside, which will help me to showcase that I'm good at this subject as well, right? So that could be one thing. Or let's say I want to do economics major, but for some reason I could not take economics HL, then in that case, I would probably take a AP microeconomics and macroeconomics and showcase that to the college. So these are different reasons why people write AP. And then, for APs, we have done webinar last month, and if anyone is interested, we would be happy to share the recording from there, and we might be doing another one next month. We'll keep you posted on that. But AP in itself is a huge topic where we talk about how it helps, what are the majors, and how do you select the right subject, and so on. My team is there on the call as well. If in case you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Post this webinar, post this session, and we'll be happy to sit with the child individually, because I think in AP, what is most important and critical is to figure out what are the right subjects that you should be picking up for doing the APs, because as I said, there are more than 30 plus subjects in which you can take APs, right? Now, having said that, let's move on to the last part, which is the testing timelines, right? So I think I've covered the most of it, but this one presentation can probably help you understand what I was trying to explain you. It's grade 9, 10th, 11th, 12th journey. So your academics from all the 4 years are critical. And then you're doing your profile development work, right? Which includes, as I said, internship, research work, social service, leadership work, co-curricular activities, extracurricular activities, and so on and so forth. On top of this is your standardized test prep, right? In grade 9, you would probably do a PSAT. In grade 10th, some kids write PSAT, or they also write SAT, or in some cases, they start preparing for the SAT in grade 10th. During the summer break of grade 10th, you should definitely by the time start preparing for SAT, and also try and write the SAT before your grade 11 start, right? So in grade 11th or in grade 10th also, there are students who write APs. There are actually students who write APs in grade 9th as well. So APs can happen 9th, 10th, 11th. It can actually happen in 12th as well, right? So APs can happen all 4 years. SAT should happen by 10th or latest by 11th. SAT or ACT, right? And PSAT can happen in 9th, can happen in 10th. For US citizen, it can happen in grade 11, because as I mentioned, it's also known as NMSQT, right? And then 12th is the time where you are applying. So that's your college application process. So that's how your entire timelines sort of look like. I hope this helps. And as I said, it's going to be a very, very personalized thing for every family. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to sit with you and help you understand how these timelines can stack up for the child. Now, let me quickly talk about, so we did mention that, there are a lot of colleges in India as well, which have started accepting SAT scores. And some of these are mentioned here. So Ashoka University, Azim Premji, Flame, Kriya, Manav Rashna, Plaksha, Srivnadar, and many other universities. There are almost about 30 plus universities which have already started accepting SAT scores. So one option is obviously you go and write their individual exams, or the other option is you write the SAT exam and then submit it to all these colleges, right? So which is obviously much simpler rather than trying to write 5 different exams. So that's also one of the reasons why SAT is gaining a lot more popularity in India. Now, let me quickly talk about the pedagogy or the method that we follow. So our training methodology for SAT, AST, or for AP, for that matter, sort of rely on the same framework, which is 4-phase approach. Phase 0 is where we do the diagnostic to figure out where the child is at this point of time and where the child wants to reach. Phase 1 is the classroom training, which is all happening online. We are a pure digital company where there are roughly about 40 to 50 hours of sessions, which happens for maths, reading, and writing. And then there are assignments pertaining to each class. And post every class, the student will have to put their scores in the score tracker, which is being tracked by the mentors which are allocated to them. In phase 2, there's a personal mentor which get assigned to every student. This mentor will look at the student performance from phase 1 assignment and figure out the areas where the child has done well, and the area where the child still needs to work upon. Right. And this is the point where child will end up doing a lot of sectional tests. Post sectional test, they will have a meeting with their mentor, personalized mentor. The mentor will look at their speed, their accuracy, and based on that, figure out what areas the child needs more help. That happens in phase 2. Once they reach a certain level of accuracy, we move them to phase 3, which is largely about the mock test, where student would end up writing at least about 10 plus full length mock tests. To assess them, there is again mentors who would keep looking at the score, keep analyzing their scores and figure out where they're going wrong. And obviously the self-analysis has to be done by the child as well, for which we give them a detailed analysis report post every test. So that happens in phase 3. So that's the basic framework that we follow, whether it's SET, whether it's ACT, whether it's AP program, which will include the classroom training, which will include the sectional test, and then that includes the full length test. On top of it, there are mentors, personalized one-on-one mentors, which are being assigned to every student, which work with each family to figure out the areas that they need to really work upon. In addition to that, there are online platforms that we have wherein we provide you almost about 100 plus hours of concept videos for you to go back and revise at your own pace. So it's a self-paced course as well that you could go back and do it on your own, along with the other practice questions and so on. And then we have different modules all across. So there is something called full training, which I just explained to you. There's something called ACT study plan, which only includes phase 2, phase 3. So the mentor support, the material, and the full length test. And then we have SAT Lite, where students just come to us and say, hey, you know what? I think I'm already doing well, and I just want to do the practice test. So they come to us for just doing the practice test, and they get a detailed report post test. So that happens on the SAT Lite module. So there are a wide range of modules that one can opt for depending on the requirement and the need. So yeah, I think with that, we come to an end for today's webinar. And with that, I will open the forum for Q&A sessions. If in case you guys have any questions pertaining to SAT, ST, AP's curriculum, I'm happy to answer those. Yeah, please feel free to put up the questions on the chat section. You can also unmute yourself and ask the questions. That's also completely fine. Okay, for some reason, I'm not able to access my chat. Is that happening with other folks as well?
Hello. No.
Hi, I have a question from Ray. Yeah, please.
My child is still in 9th standard and she's pursuing, she's undergoing a CIE board right now. And although specialization subjects are taken in prior and CIE board, so she has taken PCMB. She's not still clear whether she's going for the medicals or not. But is it advisable, like I'm not sure whether she'll be going to appear for the NEET examination. But is it advisable for the aspirants who are going to appear for the NEET, they should appear for the SAT exams? Like we are not very sure whether she'll be appearing for the NEET or what she's going to do in future, because it is still too early, but she's in 9th standard right now.
So I didn't get the question, Ray. So see, basically it's very, very clear, right? If in case you're looking to go abroad, irrespective of whatever major, she will have to write the SATs. But if she has to stay in India, then she can write NEET. However, I mean, if you're looking medicine as a major, you know, I would say do a bit of more research, because medicine in US is very, very different path, right? So you don't do directly MBBS there, right? I mean, there you have to do a pre-med, which is a 4-year degree. So first you do a pre-med, which is a 4-year degree, and post that you have to still write an exam to get into a medicine, right? So medicine in US is almost about 8 to 9 years degree, as opposed to India, which is like a 4 to 5 year degree, right? And there is no guarantee that you will get medicine in US. So first you have to apply to a pre-med, which is a 4-year undergrad degree, and then you do an MD, right? So the medicine in general is a very, very different stream altogether. You have to be very clear in terms of what the child is asking for, because of the financial burden also, right? Because you're looking at going abroad for 8 years, which is a long journey in itself, right? And hence, I would say, try and explore a little bit more. Let her also explore about it, and then take a call whether she is looking at, is she 100% sure about medicine? And if yes, then should it be outside or India? And based on that, decide. She can't do NEET and SAT both. She can do it, but I don't think that's advisable because both of them requires a good amount of effort.
Okay, the SAT is usually required for the students who are into the commerce and the math stream.
No, SAT is required by everybody, but irrespective of whichever stream you are in.
Okay.
Yeah, SAT is required by everybody, irrespective of whichever stream you are in, but not for India, for US.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure if you had joined late because we had this discussion like slightly earlier in the webinar. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar as well, so you can probably go through that as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, Ray. For some reason, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to see my chat. My chats are not working today. So if you can raise your hand and probably ask the question, that will be great. I can see the Mr. PA has a question.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
this Prashant here.
Hi,
Yeah,
Prashant.
so other thing is what I wanted to understand is like one is MBBS, what you're advising, but what are the other fields, not MBBS, where engineering and medical, both the things are linked. I understand in the engineering side only, but more connected to medical related researches and those things.
Can you repeat your question, Prashant? I'm
So
not
my
able to
question
understand.
is, it's what I wanted to understand is primarily medical. When we go in, it is just MBBS and that thing comes in. But today, a lot of researches and those things are happening in neuroscience or neurorobotics and those areas. So what are the fields where medical plus engineering, both the things are combined well, or what kind of engineering?
So biotech is an example, right? Biotech is an example, neuroscience, as you said, is an example, forensic science is an example. So that's not related to medicine, right? So doctor per se is MBBS. The path for whatever you have mentioned is very similar to engineering or economics or anything, right? So you go and apply it for undergrad there, right? So you apply for undergrad in, let's say, neuroscience, or you apply for undergrad in biotech. So you still do an undergrad there. You don't do it under MBBS, like you don't fall under like a doctor purview, right?
Correct.
So that path is very straightforward. You do an undergrad there, right? Which is also a pre-med, and post that, if the child wants, they can decide to do medicine. After 4 years, if the child still has that passion left towards the medicine, they can continue to, they will have to write a certain exam. If they clear that exam, at that point of time, after 4 years, they will be allowed to get into an MD program.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Prashant. I think there's a question from Gauri.
Yes, there are. I can read the questions out on the chat here.
Perfect, please.
What is the sectional adaptive test?
Okay, perfect. I'll answer that. Gauri, can you please name the person as well? That'll be helpful.
Yes, this question is from Ms. Debjani Pradhan.
Debjani. Hi, Debjani. So basically, I think we talked about it in the thing. So we will share the recording. I'm not sure if you were there in the beginning. By sectional by adaptiveness, I mean, so I don't know if you know GMAT and GRE, right? So GMAT is an exam that you write if you want to do MBBS abroad, right? So that is a question-wise adaptive test. So let's say if you do a question, depending on your performance in this question, your next question will be decided. However, SAT is going to be a sectional adaptive test. So the first section that you have is the reading and writing. Under reading and writing, you have 2 stages. The first stage, as I said, 27 questions, 32 minutes. Depending on your performance in stage 1, your stage 2 questions will be decided. So stage 2 will already have 2 sets installed in the system. Based on your performance in stage 1, it'll be decided, should it be the first set or should it be the second set? That's how the adaptiveness works, right? So for example, if you have, so out of 27 questions in the beginning, they might have, let's say, 5 easy, 5 difficult, and, let's say another 17 question as medium difficulty, right? Now, child has only gotten 50% score here. Now, if that's the case, they're going to get the easier section. The next stage would be an easier section, and that section will have more number of easy questions, less number of difficult, and slightly more of medium, right? However, if the child gets, let's say, about 90% in the first section, then the next section that they get will have far lesser number of easy questions and more of difficult questions, right? I hope I'm able to answer that question, Devjani.
But does it impact on weightage as well? Like if a child is able to clear complex question, easy questions or maybe complex question, then he's going to get further complex question, and the other child who is not able to solve the complex question, he's getting easy question. So is it weighted equally then for both the
No.
childs?
Yeah, it's so excellent question, Prashant. So basically, they do not look at the easy and the medium. They look at the number of questions that you've done correct. That's one, right? Secondly, the second section, when you're doing, right? So let's say, I think your question could be that next time when a child got an easier question, they might end up doing better in that stage, right?
Yeah.
But the tricky part there is, even if you do great in that particular section, they have fixed the upper threshold of your score. Even if you get 100% in that easier section, you will not be able to score beyond 600 out of 800.
Okay, but in complex, you should be able to, right?
Yes, in complex, yes.
Okay.
So basically,
so
let's say after stage one,
there.
yes, after stage one, they will decide which one they need to throw at you, right? Would it be, let's say the child, as of now, they have figured out the child is of a caliber of 200 to 600 scale, right? So the next section would be of that level. Even if you end up doing everything right in the next stage, you will only get maximum of 600, right? Whereas in the other section, if you've done well in the first stage, you would be in a scale of 450 to 800. Now that's the next section, if you end up doing everything right, you actually might get 800.
Okay.
Right. So they will limit the highest marks for the easier section any which ways. Right. So they will do some sort of weightage to say so there. Yeah. Thanks, Prashant.
Hi.
Yeah. Gauri, just a second. I think we have a few questions from Anuradha and Praveen, so we'll take those.
Sure.
I can see the hands. Yeah. Hi, Anuradha, you want to go first?
Yes, thanks. You're talking about profile building, right? That apart from academics, profile building is also important. And if a child, say, takes up commerce and economics, he or she will have to show something to evidence the fact that they're interested in it. So in Bangalore, what are the options for internship for children, say, in economics or, say, commerce after grade 10 or 12?
Anuradha, you'll have to figure out, right? So you'll have to, first you have to look around in your network, in the companies around in your network. Is there anybody who would like to take up, right? So there are enough fintech startups in India, right?
All right.
Right. So you will have to figure out some internship in those companies. And to be very, very honest, yes, it will happen. There is no a procedural route to say so, right? It's more of an exploration where you'll have to reach out to your connect and personal connect and use those networks to get the internship. But more meaningful is, the work that they end up doing there. It's not about showing an internship. I'm a strong believer of, having a depth in what you're doing rather than having the breadth of things, right? It's not about doing 10 things. It's about doing 3 things, but have a depth in it. Because to be very honest, US admission officers are smart enough. They're reading so many applications, they can really figure it out. We can't really game the system, right? And hence, I think it is important, when they see that in 12th is when you're applying and, somebody did the internship like 2 months before that, right? So they could really figure it out. So I think it's important if you start, that's why I said it's a 4-year journey, bare minimum, right? 9, 10, 11, 12. For those who have already missed some time, that's okay. You should start as soon as possible. But if in case you have time, start as early as possible, right? So it's not just about internship. The child could do, let's say, certain Coursera courses, right? And you get certain certifications from there as well, right? The child could do courses in AP. The child could try and, I don't know, maybe, see if he can write a paper on economics. Can he write something on Ukraine crisis, right? Can he publish that, right? So these are a few examples, right? So it's more about seeing what's happening around and that the child has to has to have the passion to do it, right? You can't really force them to do it.
Thank you. That gave me some insight. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Anuradha. I think I have Mr. Praveen here who has raised his hand.
I got few questions about APs and SATs. I mean,
Yeah, Praveen.
I suppose you are providing some courses. So, I mean, are your courses like time bound? Because you see that class 11 and class 12 students, time saving of time, is very important and very crucial. They're always falling, short of time. So, how do you see what is your basically the duration you offer, minimum duration which is required for SAT preparation, and the same for in case of APs. You explained about like APs. I mean, you will be saving this much money, but how much money we will be spending here for having that AP subject cleared or passed out? So, and how much time is required for that? That's my query.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first because that's fresh in my mind. So you talked about AP, right? How much money you would be spending? The only money that you spend is for registration of the exam, which is about 13,500 rupees, if I'm not wrong. In addition to that, if in case you opt for companies like us for additional help, you will end up paying for that. Otherwise, if the child is capable of, on its own, they can do the exam on their own as well. They don't need any support, right? So I think the fixed cost is 13,500, which is the registration cost. I think the most important thing, which is very, very important here, Praveen, is I think more than money is the time factor, as you mentioned, right? Because I think they have, I think one thing which they have foundation is the time, right? So I think the only reason why I suggest taking help is only to save time, right? So let's say if a child is able to do something on their own, maybe in 100 hours, the organization like us might be able to provide that same thing maybe in 50 hours because we are doing it for our living, right? So we would have done more research and we would have more materials and so on and so forth. I think that's the only advantage that I see where you end up saving time, the student time basically, right? Now to answer the first question about the SET program or the AP program also for that matter, it generally takes anywhere between 4 to 6 months. That's a general timeline for any program. Depending on program to program, the time commitment varies. For example, for APs, for a subject, you're almost looking at about 100 hours of time commitment, which includes classes, assignments, mock tests, everything, which can be about for the next 6 months, right? For example, the next exam is in May. So some students will start now and in the next 4-5 months, they'll have to spend that much time, right? Now, with regards to time constraint, we provide different options. So there's obviously the batch option where you can come and join us in a particular batches. However, at the same time, you also have one-on-one options where you could come and take the sessions at your own convenience, at your own time slots, right? And obviously, pricing-wise, that's higher than the group sessions. But do we have the option? Yes, we do have the option for both group and one-on-one. I hope I have answered your question, Praveen.
So I mean, like, can you share the locations in case of Delhi where you are having the centers?
So we are only operating online. So we are a pure online company, Praveen. We don't have centers at all. It's a pure digital. But what I'll do is, Praveen, I'll ask Gauri from my team to give you a call back probably post this meeting, and she'll be able to answer all your questions specifically to the program if that helps.
I mean, do you have if you are operating online, then I mean it's perfect. I mean, perfect way of saving the time, because
Correct.
class 11 and class 12 students are, I mean, I believe they have got a level where they, I mean, already COVID has made us learn.
Taken a lot of their time. Yeah.
We are already mature on online learning, so no
Yes.
question on that. So I mean, the time frame which you said, because every student remains very much concerned. They repeatedly ask their parents the question about how much time we need to devote on this particular activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
They remain more than you, I mean, concerned about the duration of time availability for such. I mean, if you are going for SAT or you're going for AP, so time, it should be time bound. I mean, I'm not talking about average student. I'm saying like above average student. I mean, they should be able
Right.
to cope with this all on their own. But still, I believe guidance and I mean, expertise always helps in saving the time. So
Correct.
that's what I believe. I mean, so
Yeah,
we
no,
should
definitely,
not
Praveen.
think much
Definitely.
about money. But of course,
Correct.
if there is some mechanism is there which can save their time, then it's going to be like magic, I believe.
Correct. And the child can invest the same time in, let's say, profile building for it, right? So it's all about, in that limited time, how much can they do, right? And that's all that we're trying to do here. I mean, honestly speaking, none of these tests are, as difficult as our Indian entrances, right? I mean, they're far simpler as compared to those, but it's more about saving those time and then investing that time into something else. Because as I said, it's not just a combination of tests, it's your academics, your tests, and your profile, everything put together. So that's a lot of work. Yeah.
Because in ACT, you see, engineering students already having very good or rich background of mathematics, and I believe to some extent English as well. They need only expertise level of guidance and limited number of classes, either online, offline, whatever. So that
English is where they struggle, though.
improve.
Like, I think I would beg to differ in the English component, though. They really struggle. Because this English is a very different level English, unless the child is coming from an IB background or something. CBSE and ICSE kids really struggle with the English that we have here. But I mean, over a period of time they improve, so I don't think that's a challenge.
Daily-based, sorry, I mean to interrupt. Daily-based students always remain above certain level actually in English, in case of English.
Right.
And biggest achievement is mathematics. If the child is good in mathematics, then I think 50-60% job done. So remaining 40% job is to be done by through guidance or expertise.
Right.
I mean, what I understand.
Right.
That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just a point to add here, like whether IGCSE or IB, that would make a difference in selection, or primarily I understand that's a different curriculum, but do they make any difference there?
Great question, Prashant. No. So if you ask me, it would not make much of a difference in terms of the admission directly, but indirectly there are repercussions to it. One is, let's say, if you're going from an IB and IG school, so most probably most of the students from that school must be going abroad, right? So they already have an alumni network there. So the college would already know the school per se, right? So they have let's say, a mindset set about that particular school, right? So they know what caliber of student comes from there, right? So that could be a boon or a bane, both the direction, right? So that is one. Unlike the CBSE and ICSE. Second is, it's easy for them to understand when you say the child is at 42 out of 45 in IB, because that's also something that they understand in their language, as opposed to that the child got 95%. Because I mean, you look at the CBSE scores and you'll realize everybody is getting 95. So, where are those who are not getting that, right? So, and hence it sort of becomes difficult for them to standardize it. And hence, if you remember, I said that, it's good to write the AP to showcase that, this is where I stand. That's my benchmark, right? Because AP is something it's their language. It's US language, right? So they understand if you get a 5 on 5, where do the child stand? So it definitely helps. But I have seen students from CBSE background, ISC background, or for that matter, state board background, even going into the top colleges, right? So I don't think it'll stop you, but would it help you? It'll help you in certain percent, let's say certain extent. Yeah.
And how early should a student start for a set or that preparation? Is it the 9th or even earlier they can do what? Okay, 10th.
10th grade is what I generally recommend. That's a good time. Before that, child can always, build the reading habit, right? Because that's, as I was talking to Praveen also, right? That the English is one of the major component where most of the students struggle. So it's important that the child is good in, child develops reading skills, right? Because comprehension skills.
So
because that's one of the area where
curriculum would help. So English primarily,
the
I think IB or
help.
IGCSE curriculum would be more helpful, right?
Yeah, it will help. But at the same time, even at home, even if you're doing a CBSE, ICSE, even if the child is reading 1 article a day, right? I think that would really help, because the child will start understanding the complexity of these passages, what they're going through and so on, right? So I generally recommend, can you read 1 article a day? And that itself will build, go a long way, irrespective of whichever curriculum you're in.
And last thing is like AP, what we are saying, like AP physics and these things, what is their level? Is it up to 10th or 11th level of India CBSE, or it is totally, what level is it?
It's up to 11th level. If you're talking about physics, mechanics, if you're talking about physics, electricity, magnetism, that's grade 12. So it varies from subject to subject, Prashant. So I think it's very, very important to figure out you're in which grade, and based on that, you pick up the AP subjects. And again, that's a broader topic in itself. For example, if the child is in grade 9, right? So what AP can they write? They could probably think about writing computer science. If in case the child has some interest already, if they have done some sort of language in school, right? They could look at doing psychology. They could look at doing world history. They could look at doing microeconomics. So there are certain subjects which are slightly easier in nature or more theoretical to say so. Those are the subjects that the child could pick up when they're in grade 9th and 10th. And then when they get to a grade 11, they could pick up more solid subjects.
And if so, a student appears for SAT in 10th grade, and so I think that is generally valid for 5 years. There is no
5 years.
expiry, what I heard. But will that be? Will there be any impact if someone clears into let's say 11th and someone clears in 10th?
No.
Or it will be counted equally?
It's counted equally. It doesn't really matter to them. Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you've done it in the last attempt, that doesn't matter. The scores are valid for 5 years.
And if student appears 2 times, the highest one would be calculated, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, not really. There it depends on college to college. So there are generally 3 broad categories of college. The first category of college will say submit all your score, irrespective of how many you have done, right? The second category of college will say submit the best score. The third category of college will say submit the best super score. So you can actually take one section from one and the other section from another one.
Okay.
So let's say you can take English from one and the maths from the other one as well.
And the TOEFL, whether that exam also helps, or how is that? Because I read somewhere
it's an English proficiency test. So you will have to write it if you are an Indian citizen, just to showcase that you're, because the medium of communication there is going to be English, right? So just to be on the safer side, you have to write it. It's more of an immigration requirement than an admission requirement. It won't really affect the admission decision for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe someone from your team can connect, and I would like to know more details about AP and those things after the call.
Sure, Prashant.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks.
There are more questions here, Rajdeep.
Yeah, Gauri, please go ahead.
So the question from Debjani Pradhan is, SAT score is valid for which all countries?
Okay, so again, I think we have taken that question, but I'll repeat. So US, you have to do it. The other countries where you can also submit this is Canada, Singapore, Australia, but it's not mandatory.
Okay, question from Meghna Shirsagar is that what are your fees modules for different modules? So that we will share with the interested parents.
Yes.
There's a question from Jijo John. He asks, SAT is also for subjects other than engineering and medical?
That's right, Mr. Jijo. SAT is for everything. So if you plan to go, if the child plans to apply for undergrad in US, for any degree, irrespective of whichever degree you apply to, SAT is mandatory. Apart from all the UC's colleges, let me also mention that here, since we did not talk about it, all the universities, all the colleges in California, which is just 9 colleges, they don't need SAT scores, but all the other colleges in US requires you to have the SAT scores.
Okay. Question from Amit is, my daughter is pursuing 12th standard and preparing for JEE. Whether it is advisable to appear for SAT in December or go for online later in March 23.
Okay. So Amit, if your daughter is already in grade 12, we are already late because the admission process started in July, August this year, right? So that's where US admission and Indian admission are different. Right? So US admission actually starts 6 months, 8 months ahead of, like, students have started receiving admissions already, right? So maybe, we can have a one-on-one discussion and try and figure out, because I'm not sure if you plan to do a gap year in between and then apply next year, or if you have to apply this year, then it has to be December. That's the only option left. And there are only few universities left which will accept now, because early decisions are over, early application deadlines are over. It's only the regular application which is left now. So we'll have to understand it a bit more in this case, and then probably we can help. Yeah.
Okay, I think you've already spoken to Mr. Praveen Garg, but he has a question here which says, please name Canada universities benefiting SAT scores for engineering courses.
You can take any university, University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, British Columbia. All these universities provide you an option where you can submit your SAT scores. I mean, we've had actually students in the past who had SAT scores, because of which they actually got some scholarships as well there.
Okay, Swapna asks, I am in grade 10. Is the diagnostic test charged? Do we take the diagnostic test first and then decide whether we should enroll and pay to start full SAT training?
Great question, Sapna. Yes, diagnosis test is completely free of cost. You can take the test and then decide whether you want the training or not. It's available on our website. Post the webinar today, we'll be sending out the links, which will have the recordings from today's webinar, and will also have the link for doing the free diagnostic test. Feel free to go ahead, write the diagnostic test. However, the diagnostic, which is there online right now, is the old diagnostic, which is for the December SAT, but you can still go ahead and take it because the type of questions still remains the same. It's only the length of the test and so on, which is changing. So go ahead and write it just to get the understanding of where we are. Post diagnostic, you can decide to sign up, not sign up. That's completely up to you. Diagnostic is free of cost.
There's this last question from Mr. Atif Ahmed Mazhari. He says, when is the correct time for applying to colleges? And if so, when should the SAT and AP tests be written?
Okay, so I think we did mention, I think we did talk about this in detail when we were talking about the timelines, right? But so if you are looking at US, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. You start applying in your grade 12th. So let's say if you are in grade 11th right now and next year you're in grade 12th. So in 2023, around August, September, October frame, you will apply to the colleges. That means you have to have your SAT score latest by October next year, right? So, and APs you can have, APs happen only once a year, which is in the month of May. That's a very critical information. So you have to plan it well ahead of time. If in case you're in grade 11, then you can write one AP or two APs or three APs in the coming May. So that could be the AP that you could write, or you can also write it after 10. So Atif, we need to know which grade you are in, and then probably I can help you better in terms of the planning.
Actually, I'm in 11th class, 11th, I mean. So that is why I was
11th, right?
asking regarding the admissions. I saw a
Got
video
it.
regarding the admission process. There is an early phase, and there's a one more phase between the
Early decision,
March
early
of,
application, and regular decision.
yeah, during August or September. So I heard that
Correct.
in the early phase, you're more likely to get accepted in those colleges than the
Right. Correct.
one
That's what I
which
said.
is
So August, September, October, that's your early action, right? So next year is when you have to apply. If you're not done the SAT, you should do your SAT at the earliest. So maybe in the month of March or May, you should write your SAT, right? And I think you'll have to calibrate and see whether you have time to do the AP or not, because AP is not mandatory. It's good to do, it's not must do, right? So if in case you think you don't have enough time, you can actually skip the AP as well. But if in case you want to write it, then you have to write it in this May. That's the only option left for you. I hope that answers the questions.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, question from Ray is, do you provide insight about various streams under medical and medical with engineering and courses to opt for abroad?
Do we provide insight? No, Mr. Ray, we don't directly provide any such insight. However, you can always go to, let's say, there are different websites where you can go. You can go to college search. You could go to US college rankings. You will be able to see all the majors there which are being offered for undergrad, and based on that you could also be able to pick the majors, and you'll also know what are the subjects which are pertaining to each major. So I think these are a few places which you can go and look at.
Here's the last question from Smita N. She asks, hi, my son is in grade 11 CBSE. Is it recommended to take December or prepare for March 2023 SAT exam?
Smita, it might be too late now because you're hardly 2 weeks away from the next exam, 3 weeks away from the next exam. So I would recommend to prepare for the digital now and not look at December. So we will probably note down your name, and Gauri, maybe you can put down your number onto the chat section. You can reach out to Gauri as well, and then have a discussion. But yes, I would not recommend you to do the December. I would say postpone it to March or May. So your first attempt could be March, and then the second attempt could be May.
Those are the questions for now, Rajdeep.
Okay. Yeah, I will wait for maybe another 1 or 2 minutes. It's 12:12, so maybe 12:15 we'll wrap up. If there are any more questions, please feel free to put in. I hope the session was useful. I hope there was some value derived out of it. We keep doing this every month. So if in case, you're interested, you could let us know and we'll keep sending you the mails about these. I think I see Anuradha has raised her hand. Yeah, Anuradha, please tell me.
Yeah, one more question. So do you also help with admissions to Indian universities, like say Plaksha, Ashoka?
We can talk about it, Anuradha. Yes, we do. We can talk about it. Honestly, the process is pretty straightforward. But if in case you need any help, we should be able to do it. We'll note down your probably name and we can connect offline.
Great.
Over the phone. Yeah.
Fine.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks. So yeah, as I said, right, so post webinar, we will be sending out the mails with the recordings for today's webinar. It will be on YouTube. If in case you think it was useful, please do help us reach out to more people. Please share it in your network. You will have the YouTube link there. Share out probably in your mom's group, in school, friends and circle. I think it will help us to reach out to the much wider audience and help them, get some idea in terms of what is the right time to start, because we keep getting these parents who are already in grade 11th or grade 12th. And because they didn't know about the process, now they're already very, very late, right? So we want to make sure that people are aware about what is the right time to start, and whether they do it or not do it, that's up to them. But at least they should be aware what is the right time that they should be starting, because unlike Indian colleges, the admissions in abroad works very, very differently. The process is different, the timelines are different. So the idea here is to reach out to more people, make them aware about these timelines and so on. Yeah. Great. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining in. It was pleasure having all of you today on Saturday morning. Wish you have a lovely weekend ahead. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.